יש לנו אורח יקר הפעם. שמו דיוויד שטרן. דוד שטרן.
דוד.
אחר כך נברר דיוויד או דוד. והוא המנהל האומנותי החדש של האופרה הישראלית. שלום מאסטרו.
Shalom, Arik.
Tell me, so is it David or David?
Well, it has been David all my life, but when I cross the border and, I feel like I might make my aliyah every time I come here. So it's David when I'm in Israel.
And your father is Isaac or Yitzchak?
No, my father will always be Isaac.
You know, there is a very famous conductor who decided that he must change his family. He was Stern, but he thought that Stern is not a good name for a conductor. You know who is this conductor? His name is George Scholti.
No.
Yes.
Scholti, that is
Scholti
very
was
funny.
a Stern.
And I have another story for you. Many, many years ago, an agent comes up to a young violinist many years ago and says, Stern is a lousy name. You've got to change it to something else. And my father kept his name, and somehow he still managed to have a career.
So Stern is good enough.
It's good enough.
Stern.
Stern. Stern. I think it's fine to stay with Stern, yes.
Kochav in Hebrew, you know.
Kochav, yes.
So you are the new artistic director of the Israeli Opera.
Yes, this
How's
is my
life?
first season. Busy. There's a huge responsibility to be the music director of the opera here. It's a wonderful house. Every time I've worked in the house, I've enjoyed myself. You walk in, and you feel like you're already doing the opera from the entrance already.
Such a young man and big responsibility.
I feel like I'm getting older very quickly, so I don't think the young man part definitely is going to last very much longer. Why not? Now is the time.
We have so much what to talk about. We thought we shall have one program about David, Stern, Kochav, and one about Isaac. But why not start with Isaac and postpone the David for another time?
I think that makes great sense.
And we would like to watch together a short masterclass of your father, Isaac Stern, our most beloved great violinist.
Now, do this once with me. Here. Not too fast. Just slower. Yeah. Here, listen with me.
Yeah, here.
Now, do it slow. 1, 2. 1, 2. Once more. 1, 2. Now, tempo. 1, 2. 1, 2. With the cello. The upbeat to 230. No. I don't want. No, I just want to do this passage. 235. 235. Just the cello with us. Good. Listen to us. Bum, bum, bum. Yes. Now the next one. Hold it a minute, Sasha. Dum ba yaram. Here.
255, do. Yep, bum.
Just one second, Sasha, before we go. Same thing.
What's that?
Yeah, be careful.
David, your father was never a teacher.
My father was always a teacher, but he was first and foremost a student. And that's what made him a good teacher. He learned from teaching.
But he could never hold a teaching position in a school or...
He could never deal with a structure as a school. He never went to school. How was he supposed to know about school? He left school when he was a teenager. His mother took him out of school in San Francisco and kept him practicing all day. He had tutors.
And he himself could not afford to have the time to teach. And when I see all these videos, I'm saying to myself, what a waste. He's a born teacher.
He was a born teacher in exactly the way he was. In other words, he was perfect for giving an inspiration that would last a lifetime. Whether he was the kind of teacher who would be able to do it every week to the same person is another thing. And for that, I don't think he would have been the ideal teacher.
Masterclass was his cup of tea.
Masterclass was everything for him. It put everything. It allowed him to play, listen, talk. He was and smoke his cigar at the same time.
And you know, Masterclass, it is for the student, it is for the public, and it is for the camera. And he could...
But first and foremost for himself. See, that's why. When my father did something, he did it because he wanted to, and you felt that he was doing it out of his own desire, and you felt his excitement. He didn't, when you watched Heifetz giving masterclasses, you feel like the master is sitting there waiting to destroy the pupil. My father was there to share an experience, and that's what made it so great.
Let's watch some Mozart. I admire this Mozart.
It was very natural.
No, two and two. That's it. They must always be heard. Don't be afraid. Continue in forte. Forget the piano. The piano is not correct. Yeah. All together. Let me see you do this for me. Now. Yes, but put the bow on the string. That's it. Now listen. Not with not with the whole arm. No, catch it with your fingers. That's it. Now, don't stiffen here, just the end of the finger. That's it. Now, the second note, do this. That's it. That's what you think of. Don't do this. Two even notes. Now separate them. That's what you think about, okay? Very good. Go home and practice.
David, your father was the most charismatic soloist I could imagine, yet he was a great chamber music player.
Great chamber music player does not mean you can't be charismatic. He was charismatic when it was necessary, but he also knew how to accompany. So he knew how to get out of the way. And that's why the trio with Eugene and Lenny was such a wonderful success.
But to play chamber music, you have to give up little egomania, ego trips, ego self-centered.
Yes, and you also have to know when to turn it on when you need to. So you know how to get out of the way, and then there, you have to be right there.
And I recall some of their concerts in a huge hall in Binyanei Ha'uma, chamber music, a trio, and it was as intimate and yet projecting.
And why? Because it was intimate between the three of them. There was so much listening going on. Leonard Rose and my father could play together, and you would not... It was different tessituras, but the same voice. You don't find that today.
Well, let's see some chamber music and your father teaching the cellist or whatever.
In your discussion of the opening of the movement with Michael Haran. Now here we have, for example, you'll see enormous changes of mind that Beethoven went through in changing not only some of the actual notes, but changing the register and changing the instruments, exchanging places between the piano and cello before he made up his mind which way it would go. Now, your opening, when you were discussing it, let me just get back to that for a minute, Lenny, because it was a very beautiful thing that when you said the opening statement, and it should be, you know, it's a singing statement, it's piano, but it's a declaratory statement. It has to start. And and then your reply, the piano reply should be misterioso. Both worked beautifully. But, just for the sake of argument, I wonder, and this is a question, suppose we reverse the roles, just for a moment.
You mean have the piano
and have the cello start quietly up bow, and then the piano declare it when it comes in. What would happen?
We'll try it. Everything is possible.
But we don't promise to do it later.
No, I don't
All
know.
right.
Just for the sake of argument.
Right.
We're just trying to illustrate now between ourselves,
Absolutely.
because these are the kind of discussions one rarely has in public.
Right.
And you know, you can argue in private about this many times. We never permit this to be seen outside.
Right.
But here's a chance.
Try it.
Okay, let's try it. In other words, very softly, start up.
Right. Softly. Yeah.
I loved his voice. It was so deep. And his eloquence.
Yeah. Not bad for someone who didn't go to school.
Did not go to school.
No. He was taken out of school when he was young. He never went to high school, he never went to college. And yet he read, and he had many, many friends from whom he learned. He kept on learning. He was like a sponge, constantly learning things from other people over the years.
How many languages?
Well, you know, how many languages? A little of this, a little of that. You know, it was a big goulash.
I heard him speaking Russian.
Russian was a language he spoke with his mother, but it was his Russian.
But he was born?
He was born in Kremenets on the Ukrainian-Polish border.
And
he left when he was 10 months. So,
okay.
He was a kid coming over to America, 10 months old, and they grew up in San Francisco speaking Russian.
But above all, he loved Israel in a way that one can never understand it.
One can never understand. How can one never can understand? Of course, one can understand. You know, you grow up. You grow up in the diaspora, and comes the war, and he fell in love with Israel at the same time that he fell in love with my mother. When he came in 1948, 51. And there was a feeling of connecting to himself and to other people in a way that he had never connected before. So it was completely natural.
And when he founded the music center Mishkenot Sha'ananim, he brought with him all the greatest artists just to come to play chamber music and to teach the kids. Let's watch another video.
Let's stop right here for a little time. Take a deep breath, and everybody relax a little bit, okay? Take it easy.
Lovely, but why don't you take your time? I think it's terribly hurried. First of all, it's called Allegro Moderato, which means just at a moderate pace. If I am permitted, as a guest who just flies in from the blue, I never met you before, I must say I'm astounded about what you can do and how well you studied it. But the faster you do it, the unclearer it gets, and it's not terribly clear. And each time, if one of you sees a 16, still it gets too fast.
Bum, 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 bum. This is what Mr. Steinberg was just telling you. And that's where you stick all the time. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, bum. Dum. And from this, everything comes later. But always.
Most important, not to rush.
Yeah.
One. Take your time. Before that, and the tempo will probably take care of
Exactly.
itself.
Always.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Always.
Wait, ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da. And wait, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Wait, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Wait, ba-da-da-da-da.
And it's very difficult for the cello. Da yum pum pum, the second note. Da yata da yata da yata da da yum pum. Oh, with the bow. Da, da, da. Take your time. Da yum pum pum. Exaggerate.
David, can you tell us a little bit about this friend of your father, Mr. Steinberg, William Steinberg?
William Steinberg was, he was part of that tradition that come out of Central Europe because of the war, that established the European connection to America. Without this entire generation coming, Zell, Steinberg, Schulte, and others coming from Europe to America, there wouldn't have been what is now known as American symphonic culture.
And your father played together with Steinberg?
Yeah, very often.
Very often. Good friends. You know, the relationship here, the way they respond and tell the kids what to do is amazing. Steinberg is so frozen, a real yeke. And your father is so warm.
My father was so much not a yeke. Well, of course, first of all, Russian, and secondly, he just didn't believe, he didn't know how to be formal.
But yet he wanted to invite all the yekes together with him to come here to make a melting pot of cultures.
Well, of course. I mean, the conductor he perhaps respected the most when he was a young violinist was Zell, who was as German as you could possibly get. In a way, musically, as different from my father as possible. But that was also typical of my father. He didn't look for people like him. He looked for complementary people, so that it would be more of a team rather than everyone thinking the way he did.
You mentioned the year 51 for his first visit in Israel, and I must tell you that I was in his concert, which was in a Bima theater, not yet any other concert auditorium, not even Oil Shem, and he was introduced as the young American violinist.
Yes, yes.
And you mentioned before that he met your mother.
Well, the story goes that he met he played a concert. This was another concert, but he played a recital with his longtime accompanist, Alexander Zakin. And I'm going to get this wrong, but it's something like Zakin's mother and my mother's mother played cards together in Russia back God knows when. And they then found a connection. My mother went back to visit Mr. Stern after his concert. He invited her out to dinner, and 17 days later, this was August 1st, on August 17th, they became...
And your mother was those years an Israeli? She was Ola Hadasha? Or?
She had done her Aliyah here. She was very ardent Zionist. She was working at the radio, and then she went to New York to represent Israel at the United Nations as an interpreter.
And she speaks well Hebrew?
Hebrew, Russian, English, of course, French, German, Swedish, you name it.
And the meeting point here in Israel.
And the meeting point here in Israel.
No wonder he used to come to us twice a year at least.
Yes, he always came. He always enjoyed coming here. He always felt very much at home landing.
He took part in many projects, Mishkenot, Encounters.
Yeah, in the end, it wasn't so many different projects. In the end, I think what he needed to do was concentrate his energies on one thing. And the Encounters connected New York, Carnegie, Mishkenot, young people, music, Israel. It somehow brought everything together.
And among the artists he brought with him was Arthur Rubinstein, Pablo Casals,
well, don't forget Casals.
Just name them.
Well, of course, but don't forget Casals. Casals was the stamp, because you have to remember that my father, when he went to the Prad Festival, which was Casals' festival, my father was still just another violinist, American violinist, and he went to the Prad Festival and he met Casals, and Casals introduced him to a whole new crowd, including Sasha Schneider. And that's where my father started getting connected to a different tradition, musical tradition. So as much as my father was an American musician, he had such a strong influence from Casals and the European crowd that was around him. That was extremely important. And when he brought Chazals here in 1973, to create Mishkanot, that was the stamp of approval. It had to be Chazal.
Many of our leaders were among his close friends, best friends, like Golda, Shimon Peres, and above all, Teddy Kollek.
Teddy. They would share cigars, they would share stories.
And David, the young boy, was around?
Completely. I remember being at the King David when Chazals arrived for the opening of Mishkanot. My father, Golda, everyone was there, reunited in one room in the King David. We were all waiting for Chazals to arrive. He was 96 years old. He arrives in the plane completely exhausted, and they didn't know what to do. They brought an ambulance because they thought he was very sick. He said, "Take me to the hotel room, bring me a piano." This is Emes. They go to the King David, they bring him a piano. He spends 15 minutes alone playing Bach, and then he was fine.
Yeah,
That
I
was great.
remember. And there was a very beautiful story about Chulent that he ate and
yes,
didn't feel well.
really.
Do you remember Gina Bachauer?
Gina was a huge person. Just a huge, speaking, playing the piano, same thing. Cooking, it was all the same thing. She once came over to the house and made moussaka. I think there were 10 liters of oil per serving, but it was great.
I would like to finish our short meeting with Isaac and Gina playing together. What else if not the Spring Sonata by
Beautiful
Beethoven?
moment.
Unforgettable.
Lovely.
Unforgettable.
Lovely. Great relationship.
David, I have a feeling that we are just starting our conversation. So much to tell.
So much to talk about.
Next time, and you have to promise us you are coming next time.
Thank you.
And you have to promise us it will be a program about David.
Thank you. It would be.
With beautiful videos of some operas, like what? Don Giovanni?
I think we'll have some Don Giovanni. We'll have some Beethoven. So there'll be quite a mix.
With all these wonderful, unforgettable memories of your childhood in Israel and the future in Israel with Israeli opera.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
תודה רבה, דוד.
תודה. תודה, בבקשה.